In the heart of a busy city, nestled between towering skyscrapers and the endless flow of pedestrians, Marcus operated the small street food cart. The sizzle of meat on the grill, the smell of fresh tortillas, and the warmth of the midday sun gave him a sense of peace amidst the chaos. Each day, he stood behind his cart, serving burritos to the workers, tourists, and locals who passed by. His routine was simple, his purpose clear: make enough money to send back home to his father, who was getting older, to ensure he didn't have to work anymore. Life for Marcus wasn't extravagant. It wasn't about dreams of grandeur. It was about survival, the kind that kept you going day by day, with the hope that every small effort would eventually add up to something meaningful. That particular afternoon, though, was different. A sharp commotion nearby broke his concentration, pulling his attention away from the sizzling grill. Marcus wiped his hands on his apron, instinctively looking up from the food he was preparing. In the distance, he saw a small group of kids gathered in a circle, their laughter cutting through the air in a way that made his stomach churn. At first, he couldn't tell what was happening, but the sounds were unmistakable: mocking, ridiculing, and taunting. He felt his chest tighten. It wasn't uncommon for kids to be rowdy or mischievous in the park, but this felt different. There was a cruelty in the air, something Marcus knew too well from his own childhood. He had seen enough injustice, enough bullying, to recognize the dynamic at play here. The center of the circle was a young boy, pale-skinned with bright white hair, a boy who stood out starkly against the crowd, his features delicate and unusual. His eyes darted around nervously, his hands clutching his backpack straps as the bullies closed in. Without hesitation, Marcus set down the burrito he was working on and walked toward the group. He was no stranger to confrontation, having grown up in rough neighborhoods where standing up for yourself was sometimes the only way to get by. As he approached, the kids' jeers grew louder, and he could hear them making fun of the boy's appearance. They mimicked his voice, mocked his white skin, and laughed at the way he walked. The sight made Marcus's blood boil. He had never been one to turn away from injustice, especially when it involved someone who couldn't fight back. The group of kids didn't notice him at first, too focused on their target. But when Marcus was close enough, he called out in a calm yet firm voice, "Hey, knock it off." The children froze, looking up at the tall, broad man who had spoken. Marcus's voice was steady, his gaze unwavering, and in that moment, the bullies recognized the authority in his presence. The leader of the group, a boy with a smug look on his face, sneered. "What's it to you?" he asked, stepping closer, trying to size Marcus up. Marcus didn't flinch. "You've got no right to treat anyone like that. Leave the kid alone." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had seen the ugliness of the world and wasn't afraid to stand up to it. For a moment, the bullies hesitated. They were used to being the ones in control, the ones who dictated the rules of the playground, but something about Marcus's presence made them second-guess their actions. Without a word, the leader of the group gave a slight nod, and the others, one by one, backed away. "Yeah, whatever," the boy muttered before turning on his heel, the group trailing behind him, their heads hanging low, their bravado fading. Marcus watched them go, his eyes narrowing to ensure they didn't turn back. The young albino boy stood there, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and relief. He hadn't expected anyone to intervene, certainly not someone like Marcus, who stood out among the crowd with his broad frame and strong build. The boy shuffled awkwardly, unsure of what to do next. "Hey," Marcus said gently, crouching down so he was at the boy's level. He didn't want to intimidate him. "You okay?" The boy nodded slowly, but his eyes were still wary, darting around the park, as if expecting the bullies to return at any moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. His voice was small, almost fragile, like he didn't feel safe anywhere. Marcus could tell that the boy had been through more than his fair share of torment. He looked so small and vulnerable, and Marcus's heart went out to him. He reached into his cart and pulled out one of the freshly made burritos, wrapped it up with care, and handed it to the boy. "Here, take this. It's not much, but it might help a little." The boy looked at the burrito with a mixture of surprise and confusion. He wasn't used to kindness, not in a world that had often treated him with scorn and ridicule. But his stomach growled, and he felt a sudden wave of gratitude wash over him. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking the burrito from Marcus's outstretched hand. Marcus nodded. "No problem. You're not alone, all right. You deserve respect, just like anyone else." The boy smiled faintly, and for a brief moment, his eyes seemed to soften. It wasn't much, a small act of kindness, but for the boy, it felt like the world had shifted just a little. He unwrapped the burrito and took a tentative bite. As they sat there, eating in the quiet of the park, the boy began to talk, sharing small pieces of his life with Marcus. He talked about how hard it was for him at school, how he had always been the target of teasing, and how he had learned to hide his true self just to get by. Marcus listened, offering words of encouragement and understanding. He'd known struggle in his life too, though in different ways. They may have come from different worlds, but in that moment, they shared an unspoken bond, a connection forged in the simple act of looking out for one another. The conversation was cut short, though, by the sound of approaching footsteps. The boy's face lit up, a mix of relief and hesitation in his eyes. Marcus turned to see a woman walking toward them, a tall, elegant figure with a commanding presence. She was dressed in a business suit, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached. "Ethan," she called out, her voice warm yet firm. The boy's name. Ethan stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his pants and stuffing the burrito wrapper into his pocket. "Mom," he exclaimed, his face brightening. Marcus stood up too, stepping back slightly to give them space. The woman reached Ethan's side and placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze sweeping over him with concern. "I told you to stay close to the front desk," she said softly. "What are you doing out here?" Ethan's mother, Catherine Sinclair, didn't seem to notice Marcus standing there at first, her attention solely on her son. But as she spoke, her eyes shifted toward him. Her gaze was sharp, appraising, and for a moment, she studied him with an air of curiosity. Marcus didn't know it yet, but Catherine Sinclair wasn't just any mother. She was the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, one of the largest technology companies in the city, a woman with more wealth and influence than Marcus could have ever imagined. And in that moment, her life, as well as Marcus's, was about to change in ways neither could foresee. Catherine Sinclair's sharp eyes scanned the park, briefly noting the small crowd, the colorful patches of flowers along the pathways, and the occasional jogger passing by. But her mind was focused solely on her son, Ethan, who stood there, clutching his backpack, looking far more relieved than he had been when they had left the office earlier that day. "Mom, I didn't like it in there," Ethan muttered, his voice still carrying that hint of unease, the one that surfaced whenever he was thrown into an environment that made him feel like an outsider. Catherine knelt beside him, her elegant suit almost out of place against the casual surroundings of the park. Her fingers gently smoothed his hair, a mother's instinct kicking in as she attempted to soothe him. "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I thought we could get through this together." She paused for a moment, her gaze shifting back to Marcus, who was standing a few feet away, his gaze respectful, but with a certain calm authority. The burrito cart was still there, the smell of grilled meat hanging in the air. Catherine wasn't sure why, but there was something about this man that had caught her attention. Ethan's expression softened slightly, his shoulders relaxing as he felt the warmth of his mother's touch. "I just wanted to get away from everyone. There were too many people, too much noise, and they were staring." His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of his struggle. Ethan had been born with albinism, a condition that left him with pale skin, white hair, and light eyes. For most of his life, he had been an object of curiosity and ridicule. Even though he had grown used to the stares, the whispers, the occasional bullying, It didn't make it any easier. Catherine's heart ached for him. She was a successful businesswoman, a CEO of a billion-dollar company, but none of her professional achievements had prepared her for the challenges of motherhood. Especially not the challenges that came with raising the son who faced daily battles with insecurities about his appearance. She knew the world could be cruel, and despite her wealth, she could never protect him from all the pain that came from being different. She stood and turned her gaze back to Marcus, who still hadn't left, his presence looming silently in the background. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying a sincerity that surprised her. She hadn't expected to speak to him, let alone acknowledge his actions, but there was something undeniably kind about the way he had intervened. Marcus nodded, a humble gesture. It was nothing. He didn't deserve that. No one does. His voice was deep and steady, with a warmth that contradicted his tough exterior. There was no arrogance in his words, just a quiet understanding. Catherine studied him more closely now, her sharp business instincts kicking in as she tried to assess the man standing before her. He was tall, muscular, but not in a way that felt threatening. His skin was dark, a contrast to the pale boy he had just defended, but there was something universal about the way he spoke, a kindness in his eyes that made Catherine pause. "Still, it's not often I see someone step in like that," she said, her curiosity getting the better of her. She wasn't accustomed to encountering people like Marcus in her world, people who didn't wear suits or move in the circles of wealth and influence she was used to. She had spent so many years immersed in business meetings, high-powered negotiations, and luxury that she had forgotten what it felt like to connect with someone from a completely different world. Marcus, with his humble cart and his simple life, stood in stark contrast to everything she knew. Marcus shifted his weight, his hands folding together as he looked at Ethan. "Sometimes it's just about doing what's right. No one should feel like they're less than anybody else, especially a kid. You gotta stand up when you see something wrong." Ethan, still holding his mother's hand, glanced up at Marcus. There was something about the man, something that made him feel safe. His usual wariness around strangers melted just a little. "Thanks for helping me," he mumbled, his voice softer now. Catherine's gaze softened, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude toward this man. She was acutely aware of how hard it was for Ethan, how much he had struggled with self-esteem, with feeling like an outsider, and how a simple act of kindness could make such a difference in a young person's life. For just a moment, Ethan had been treated like a normal child, not someone to be stared at or ridiculed. It was as though Marcus had given him a shield, something to protect him from the cruelty of the world outside. "What's your name?" Catherine asked, her voice gentle but still with a sense of professionalism that was hard to suppress. She had learned long ago to keep her emotions in check, especially in situations that required her to maintain control. But there was something about Marcus's presence that made her want to soften, to connect in a way she hadn't in years. "Marcus," he replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Marcus Jenkins." "I'm Catherine Sinclair," she said, her businesswoman tone creeping back into her voice. "This is my son, Ethan." She motioned toward the boy, who was now looking up at Marcus with a shy curiosity. Marcus offered a polite nod. "Nice to meet you both." Catherine studied him for a moment, her mind working through the possibilities. Marcus wasn't just any stranger. He had done something that had made a real impact. He had helped her son, and in doing so, had given her a moment of hope for Ethan's future. It was rare that she encountered someone who made her feel like maybe there was still good in the world, beyond the polished floors of corporate boardrooms and the pressures of high society. As they stood there, the warm afternoon sun casting long shadows across the park, Catherine felt an unexpected wave of gratitude for Marcus. But more than that, she felt a pull, a sense that there was something more here, something that she couldn't quite place yet. She had grown accustomed to people wanting things from her, people who saw her only for her wealth or her status. But Marcus wasn't like that. He wasn't looking for anything. He had simply stepped in when he saw a boy in need, and he had done it without expecting anything in return. Marcus, she began again, her voice thoughtful. I can't help but wonder. Have you thought about your future? What you're doing with your life? I mean, there's so much potential in you. I'm sure you're aware of that. She was being careful, choosing her words as she always did in professional settings, but there was a sincerity to her tone that belied her usual detached demeanor. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly, confused for a moment. What do you mean? Catherine took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises. I run a company that's at the top of its field, and I have to admit, I've been looking for someone with your qualities, someone who has the right kind of heart, someone who values integrity and care, someone who doesn't just care about profit or status. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. I don't really understand what you're saying. Catherine took a deep breath. What I'm saying, Marcus, is that I think you have the potential to do something much bigger than selling burritos in the park. I believe you could be part of something that changes not just your life, but the lives of many others. Marcus blinked, unsure if he was hearing her correctly. Are you saying, you want to offer me a job? He asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Catherine nodded, her expression serious. I want to offer you more than just a job. I want to offer you an opportunity, a chance to work with people who are driven by something more than just profit, an opportunity to create something meaningful. Marcus stood there for a moment, processing her words. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could sense the weight of the moment. This simple act of kindness, this one intervention in a moment of bullying, was leading him to a place he had never dreamed of. What he didn't know yet was that this was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that would change not only his future but the future of everyone he cared about. Marcus sat on the worn wooden bench in the park long after Catherine and Ethan had left, the weight of the encounter settling into him like an unexpected storm. He had always kept his life simple, working long hours at his food cart, helping his father with repairs back home, and living day by day with the goal of getting by. His world was full of familiar faces, the kind of people who understood what it meant to hustle, to survive, and to make do with little. But today, everything had changed. He couldn't shake the image of Catherine Sinclair, her poised demeanor, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, and then her offer, one that seemed so far beyond his reach, like something out of a dream. He had never been a man of ambition, not in the way that people with money and influence were. His life had been about the here and now, the next customer, the next shift, the next dollar. The idea of working for someone like Catherine Sinclair, of stepping into a world of high-rises, board meetings, and billion-dollar deals, seemed almost absurd. Who was he to be a part of that world? But something about her had made him pause. There had been a sincerity in her voice, something that told him she wasn't just looking to check off a box or fill a position. She had seen something in him, something that he wasn't sure even he had recognized in himself. It was as if, for the first time in his life, someone had looked beyond his circumstances and had actually seen him for who he was, who he could be. His mind wandered back to Ethan, the pale, quiet boy he had helped today. He thought about the way Ethan had stood there, looking so small and vulnerable, and how that one moment of kindness had made such a difference. Maybe there was more to life than just getting by. Maybe there was something greater he could do, something that could truly matter. But what? What did it mean to change his life, and how could he possibly leave behind everything he knew? The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts, and he looked up to see a young woman walking briskly toward him, a notepad in her hands. She looked familiar, but Marcus couldn't place her. She was dressed in a professional outfit, clearly not someone who typically frequented this part of town. As she got closer, she stopped and gave him a quick, polite smile. "Are you Marcus Jenkins?" she asked, her voice soft, but with an underlying sense of urgency. Marcus squinted, his brow furrowing as he tried to place her. "Yeah, that's me. Can I help you?" She nodded, holding up her notepad as if it were a shield. "I'm Jenna Mitchell. I work for Sinclair Enterprises. I'm here because Mrs. Sinclair asked me to come talk to you. She wanted to make sure you were still considering her offer. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. You work for Catherine? He asked, the surprise clear in his voice. Jenna smiled and nodded. Yes, I do. Mrs. Sinclair has a way of recognizing potential in people, and she's very serious about the opportunity she provides. She wanted me to make sure you understood what's being offered. Marcus stood up, the weight of the situation pressing against his chest. His mind raced. This wasn't just a casual offer. This was something more significant, something that could change the course of his life forever. I don't know. I mean, this is all moving so fast. I'm just a guy selling burritos in the park. Jenna raised an eyebrow, her expression shifting to one of gentle encouragement. That's exactly why Mrs. Sinclair is interested in you. She doesn't want someone who's already part of the corporate world. She wants someone with character, someone who's not afraid to work hard and see things through. And she believes you have that. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and fear twist in his gut. I'm not sure what to do with all this. I've never been in that kind of world before. I don't have a degree. I don't have connections. All I know is how to make a good burrito. Jenna's smile widened slightly, as if she understood exactly where he was coming from. You're exactly the kind of person Mrs. Sinclair values. You have the kind of resilience and work ethic that can't be taught in a classroom. She believes that's more important than any fancy resume. Marcus's mind swirled as he processed her words. Resilience. Work ethic. It wasn't the first time someone had told him he had those qualities. His father, back home, had always praised him for his determination, for his ability to keep going no matter how hard things got. But to have someone like Catherine Sinclair, someone with power, influence, and wealth, see those same qualities in him, it was overwhelming. I don't know, Jenna, Marcus said, his voice low. I'm not sure I belong in that world. I mean, I've never even stepped foot in a place like Sinclair Enterprises. It's so different, so far away from everything I know. Jenna took a step closer, her expression softening with understanding. You're right. It is different. But that's the point. Mrs. Sinclair isn't asking you to change who you are. She's asking you to bring your strengths into a new environment, to see how they can grow, how they can make a bigger impact. Sometimes the most powerful people in the world are the ones who start with nothing but a drive to succeed and a desire to help others. You have that. Marcus remained silent, still unsure. His hands found their way back to his pockets, his mind racing as he tried to picture himself in that world. It was a world filled with shiny office buildings, glass walls, and polished boardrooms. It was the world where people wore suits and ties, not aprons and sweat. It was a world where people made decisions that affected millions of lives, and Marcus was not sure he was ready for that kind of responsibility. I can't promise you that it'll be easy, Jenna continued, her voice gentle but firm. But I can promise you that Mrs. Sinclair will support you. She believes in giving people second chances, and she wants to give you one. All you have to do is take the first step. The silence between them stretched on for a moment as Marcus thought about it. He thought about his father, back home, about all the sacrifices they had made, all the years of hard work just to survive. He thought about Ethan, that quiet boy who had looked up at him with gratitude in his eyes. Maybe it wasn't about leaving behind everything he knew. Maybe it was about using what he had learned, the resilience, the work ethic, to make a real difference. Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Okay, he said finally, his voice steady. I'll meet with her. I'll see what this opportunity is all about. Jenna's eyes brightened, a spark of approval flickering in them. I'll arrange everything. Mrs. Sinclair will be expecting you. As she walked away, Marcus remained standing there, the weight of the decision still heavy in his chest, but now accompanied by a sense of possibility. For the first time in his life, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had the chance to change not just his future, but the future of others as well. Marcus stood outside the towering glass building of Sinclair Enterprises, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The sheer size of the structure made him feel small, insignificant, like a tiny ripple in an ocean of wealth and power. The revolving doors spun effortlessly as business professionals moved in and out, their crisp suits and polished shoes, a stark contrast to his simple, well-worn attire. He had taken extra care that morning, ironing his only button-down shirt and making sure his jeans were clean. But even now, standing at the threshold of a world so different from his own, he felt like an imposter. The security guard at the front entrance gave him a once-over but didn't stop him. Jenna had sent him an email with detailed instructions on where to go, who to ask for, and what to expect. But no amount of preparation could settle the nerves bubbling in his stomach. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped forward. The cool air of the lobby washed over him, carrying the scent of fresh coffee and polished wood. The marble floors gleamed beneath his feet, and the massive chandelier above cast a warm, golden glow throughout the space. People moved with purpose, their conversations clipped and efficient. A woman at the reception desk looked up, her professional smile never faltering. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly hyper-aware of how out of place he must look. I have a meeting with Mrs. Sinclair, Marcus Jenkins." The receptionist's eyes flicked to her computer screen, and after a few taps on the keyboard, she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Jenkins. You're expected. Take the elevator to the 20th floor. Mrs. Sinclair's assistant will meet you there." He swallowed hard and nodded, forcing himself to move toward the elevators. As he waited, he could feel the curious stares of people passing by. He wasn't sure if they were actually looking at him, or if it was just in his head, but either way, he suddenly felt like an outsider in a world where he didn't belong. The elevator doors slid open, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the 20th floor. As the doors closed, he took a deep breath, steadying himself. This wasn't just some random meeting. This was an opportunity, a chance to change his life. He had to remind himself of that. When the doors opened, he was greeted by a sleek, modern office space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. A young woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit stood waiting for him. "Mr. Jenkins?" she asked, extending her hand. Marcus shook it, surprised by the firmness of her grip. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Lydia, Mrs. Sinclair's executive assistant. She's in a meeting at the moment, but she asked me to bring you to her office." Marcus followed Lydia down a hallway lined with framed photos and accolades. Each one told a story of success. Awards, newspaper clippings, and images of Catherine Sinclair shaking hands with influential figures. It was a reminder of just how far removed he was from this world. When they reached her office, Lydia gestured for him to take a seat in the waiting area. "Mrs. Sinclair will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" Marcus shook his head. "No, thank you." Lydia nodded and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Marcus alone in the spacious room. He glanced around, taking in the minimalist decor. The office was elegant but not overly flashy. A large bookshelf lined one wall, filled with business books, biographies, and financial reports. A few personal touches. A framed photo of Ethan, a hand-painted portrait that looked like it had been done by a child, gave the space a warmth he hadn't expected. Minutes passed, and just as Marcus started to second-guess why he was even here, the door opened, and Catherine Sinclair walked in. She was dressed in a deep blue pantsuit, her presence commanding but not intimidating. "Marcus," she greeted, her smile genuine. "I'm so glad you came." Marcus stood, shaking her hand. "Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Sinclair." "Please, call me Catherine," she said, gesturing for him to sit as she took a seat across from him. There was a brief silence before she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. "I won't waste your time, Marcus. I asked you here because I believe you have something that can't be taught. Character. I saw it that day in the park when you stood up for my son. You didn't hesitate. You didn't look for recognition. You just did the right thing. Marcus shifted in his seat, feeling a little uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what anyone would have done. Catherine tilted her head, studying him. That's where you're wrong. Not everyone would have stepped in. Not everyone has the courage to stand up for someone who can't defend themselves. That's a rare quality, and it's one I admire. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply nodded. Catherine continued. I'm offering you a job, Marcus. A real opportunity. Not charity, not a handout, but a chance to be part of something bigger. I want to bring you into my company, train you, mentor you. There's something in you that I know can thrive here. Marcus's heart pounded. Why me? He asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Catherine smiled. Because I know what it's like to come from nothing. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong in certain rooms. But I also know that the people who come from the hardest places often make the strongest leaders. Marcus swallowed, the weight of her words settling into him. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He had never imagined himself working in an office like this. But something about Catherine's belief in him made him wonder, what if she was right? I don't have any experience in business, he admitted. You have experience in life, Catherine countered. Everything else, we can teach you. Marcus exhaled slowly. This was a crossroads. He could go back to the park, back to his food cart, back to the life he had always known. Or he could take a chance, a real chance, to do something different, something more. He looked at Catherine, her steady gaze unwavering. And in that moment he knew. I'm in, he said. Catherine's smile widened. Welcome to Sinclair Enterprises, Marcus. Marcus woke up earlier than usual, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. The events of the previous day still felt unreal. He had agreed to work for Catherine Sinclair, a decision that could change his life forever. But doubt gnawed at him. Was he really cut out for this? Could he thrive in a corporate world where people had degrees, connections, and years of experience? His alarm buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. He had no choice but to move forward now. Rolling out of bed, he stretched, then moved to the small kitchen to make coffee. The apartment was modest, just a single room with a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom. He had made it comfortable with a few personal touches. An old radio that played jazz on quiet evenings, a photo of his father on the counter, and a small plant by the window that somehow managed to survive despite his inconsistent care. Today was his first day at Sinclair Enterprises. He had no idea what to expect. Catherine had assured him that she would guide him, but the fear of failure still lurked in the back of his mind. After a quick shower, he pulled on the best outfit he had, a simple button-down and slacks that he had bought for job interviews in the past. It wasn't a designer suit, but it was neat and presentable. He grabbed his bag and left the apartment, stepping into the crisp morning air. The train ride to the business district felt different today. Usually, he would be heading to the park, setting up his cart, greeting regular customers, and making burritos for people who barely noticed him. But today, he was entering a new world. As he stepped off the train and walked toward the towering glass building of Sinclair Enterprises, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was an outsider. Inside, the lobby was already buzzing with activity. People in tailored suits moved with purpose, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floors. Marcus walked to the front desk, where the receptionist from yesterday recognized him and offered a polite nod. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. You can go straight up to the 20th floor. Mrs. Sinclair's assistant is expecting you." He muttered a quick thank you before heading to the elevators. The nerves in his stomach twisted tighter as the numbers on the panel climbed higher. When the doors opened, Lydia, Catherine's assistant, was waiting. "Marcus, welcome back," she said with a smile that seemed genuine. "Morning," he replied, his voice slightly rough with nerves. "Follow me," Lydia instructed, leading him down the same sleek hallway from the day before. "Mrs. Sinclair has a meeting at the moment, but I'll be giving you a quick tour and getting you set up." Marcus nodded, trying to keep up as she walked briskly. You'll be starting as a special assistant under Mrs. Sinclair herself, Lydia explained. That means you'll shadow her, attend meetings, and get a first-hand look at how things work. It's a unique opportunity. Most people here had to work years before getting this close to her. Marcus swallowed hard. I hope I don't mess it up. Lydia glanced at him, a small smirk on her face. If she didn't believe in you, you wouldn't be here. That was reassuring, but it didn't fully erase his anxiety. The tour took him through different departments: marketing, finance, research, and development. Everywhere they went, people gave him curious glances, some openly staring. He wasn't sure if it was because they had heard about him, or if they were just wondering what someone like him was doing in this high-powered environment. When they finally reached Catherine's office, Lydia handed him a folder. Inside, you'll find an overview of the company, some key projects Mrs. Sinclair is working on, and a schedule of upcoming meetings. Go ahead and take a seat. She should be done soon. Marcus sat in one of the plush chairs, flipping through the papers. It was overwhelming. Business strategies, market projections, partnership proposals. None of it made sense to him yet. He was about to close the folder when a name caught his eye. Ethan Sinclair, Philanthropy Initiative. His brow furrowed as he read on. The initiative aimed to help children from underprivileged backgrounds gain access to better education and resources. Marcus was intrigued. He had assumed Catherine's fortune was built solely on business, but here was proof that she was trying to give back. Just then, the office door opened, and Catherine walked in. She looked as composed as ever, but there was warmth in her eyes when she saw him. Marcus, glad to see you made it. He stood. Wouldn't miss it. Catherine gestured for him to sit again as she took a seat across from him. I know today is going to be a lot to take in, but I want you to remember something. You belong here. No matter what anyone says, or how you feel, you wouldn't be here if I didn't believe you could do this. Marcus exhaled slowly. I appreciate that. She nodded, then leaned forward slightly. Tell me something. What do you want out of this opportunity? The question caught him off guard. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Honestly, a chance. A real chance to do something more than just survive. Catherine's lips curved into a knowing smile. Then let's get to work. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind. Marcus sat in on meetings, listening intently as Catherine negotiated contracts and discussed strategies. He was amazed at how effortlessly she commanded the room, how people hung onto her every word. But not everyone was pleased about his presence. At lunch, as he sat in the break area with a coffee, a man in an expensive suit approached. You're the new assistant, huh? The man's tone wasn't welcoming. Marcus looked up, meeting the man's sharp gaze. Yeah. I'm Richard, head of operations. Been here for 10 years, the man said, emphasizing the years. Catherine never brings outsiders this close to the top. Guess you must have really impressed her. Marcus could sense the hostility beneath the words. I guess so. Richard smirked, then leaned down slightly. Let me give you some advice. This place isn't for people who get handouts. If you don't pull your weight, you won't last. Marcus clenched his jaw, but kept his expression neutral. Thanks for the advice. Richard studied him for a moment before walking away. Marcus exhaled, shaking his head. He had expected resistance, but now he knew for sure. Some people didn't want him here. But he wasn't about to let them push him out. He had fought too hard to get here, and he wasn't going anywhere. The days turned into weeks, and Marcus found himself caught in a whirlwind of learning, challenges, and relentless pressure. Every morning, he woke up with a pit in his stomach, wondering if today would be the day he made a mistake too big to recover from. But every evening, he walked away knowing that he had survived, and sometimes even thrived. He wasn't just keeping up, he was growing. Catherine pushed him hard, but she never let him drown. She assigned him real tasks, not just busy work. She had him analyze reports, sit in on negotiations, and even present his own ideas. The first time he spoke up in a meeting, he thought his voice would betray his nerves, but it hadn't. He had proposed a community outreach program to boost the company's public image while genuinely giving back to struggling neighborhoods. Catherine had been impressed. Even some of the executives had nodded in approval. But not Richard. The head of operations had made it his mission to remind Marcus that he didn't belong. It was in the small things, the way he never acknowledged Marcus in the hallway, the subtle jabs in meetings, the way he smirked whenever Marcus hesitated. But Marcus wasn't new to this. He had spent his whole life dealing with people who thought he was lesser. Richard wasn't special. One late evening, Marcus found himself in Catherine's office, going over a report. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You've been quiet today," she observed. Marcus hesitated, just thinking. "About Richard," he admitted. "He doesn't want me here." Catherine sighed, setting her pen down. "Richard has been with me since the beginning. He's competent, but he's rigid. He believes people need to earn their way up the old-fashioned way. And he thinks I didn't." She met his gaze. "You didn't come up through the traditional pipeline." "No, but you did earn this. You earned it the moment you stepped in to help Ethan. And every single day you show up, you keep earning it." Marcus let her words settle. "I won't let him push me out," he finally said. Catherine smiled. "Good, because I have a surprise for you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A good surprise?" Catherine chuckled. "I think so. Follow me." She led him down the hall to a conference room. When she opened the door, Marcus froze. Inside, Ethan sat at the long table, a beaming smile on his face. "Marcus," the boy called. Marcus grinned. "Hey, kid." Catherine stepped inside, gesturing for Marcus to follow. "Ethan has something he wants to tell you." Ethan sat up straight, his small hands folded in front of him. "Mom told me about what you've been doing here. She says you're really smart. I knew you would be." Marcus chuckled. "I'm trying." The boy's expression turned serious. "I want to do something for you. Mom says I can. I want to invest in your dream." Marcus blinked. "My dream?" Catherine stepped forward. "Ethan wants to fund a project of yours. Something that matters to you. No strings attached." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Anything?" he finally asked. "Anything," Catherine confirmed, "as long as it makes a difference." For a long moment, Marcus stared at the mother and son in front of him. They had already given him so much, a chance, a job, a new future. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Then, an idea took shape. He turned to Ethan. "I want to start a program for kids like you. Kids who feel like they don't belong, who get picked on for being different. A mentorship program. A safe space." Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's perfect." Catherine nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." Emotion tightened Marcus's throat. He had spent his whole life fighting to prove he mattered. And now, for the first time, someone was giving him the resources to build something that mattered. He extended his hand to Ethan, who shook it with all the enthusiasm of a young boy with big dreams. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan grinned. "No, thank you." And just like that, Marcus realized this wasn't just a new beginning for him. It was a new beginning for everyone he would help. And he was ready.